obviously Stefan's invited me here, and I just let you know, I run a company called Tree Surgery Insurance, and guess what we do? We insure tree surgeons. So obviously we're not here to talk about, give you the hard sell today. Obviously we do want your business potentially, but even as much as more about informative, and maybe one day you'll come across our website. So obviously insurance is one of probably the most boring or unexciting parts of any business, right? But it's equally as much, it's probably the most important thing as well. So I appreciate you being here, and in time a lot of you guys will be self-employed, just set up your own businesses, and some of you guys will become employees. Has anybody done any work so far? Employed, self-employed?
Self-employed.
Self-employed, okay, so you've already touched being out there. And most guys, I think it's fair to say, if you are successful, if you're successful, it's like you need to come to earplugs, so I know what you're doing. Most guys, if they become employed at some point, if they're successful, they want to start their own business. So it's important that if it's not useful, this information for you today or tomorrow, it might be in 3 or 4 years' time. Equally as much, it's very important because if you're working for somebody, alright, you need to know what insurance they should have, which is really important, what the law says, alright, and what sort of protection you've got, because there is a lot of rubbish out there, okay? And I think it's fair to say most people have probably heard of public liability insurance, is that correct? And who's going to be brave enough to tell us what that is then? The gentleman who was here last year, your name is?
Finn.
Finn?
Yeah.
Finn, what's public liability insurance then?
Isn't it where you, if you do damage to a building or something?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's always good when you're thinking about remembering things, it's always to visualise it. So public liability insurance is if you damage somebody else's property effectively. It's called third party, alright? So yes, if you put a tree through somebody's greenhouse, into a car, alright, that type of thing. So that's public liability insurance, and most people have heard of it. So we have public liability insurance, although there's little chance of me doing any damage. In reality, I can leave a gate open and livestock could disappear. So even somebody in a low-risk occupation like we've got, we can still cause damage. Right, so that's really important. So public liability is for damage you might do to third parties, okay, which is normally going to be customers. Sometimes it could be the public as well. Everybody got that? Any questions at all? Good. Well, that's nice and easy, that one. Alright, so the next type of insurance that will be important to look at is the one where most confusion comes up, and that's employer's liability insurance. Okay, now, employer's liability insurance, you've been here before, so I'm not going to ask you. Anybody else guess what employer's liability insurance is going to be? Any brave souls? You at the back.
Insuring people that work for you.
Okay, it's probably them.
If they have an accident, they can claim against you and you don't have to pay for their own property.
Okay, this guy, where have you read that?
That's what I remember from last year.
Okay, yeah, broadly that is it. Broadly that is. But the employer's liability insurance is one of these things that there's a lot of confusion on, okay? Because it's what denotes an employee, okay? Which is quite obvious. So for example, let's say Stefan works for the college, it's quite obvious he's an employee, right? Charlie works for me, it's quite obvious he's an employee. I deduct his tax and salary, but not his tax and national insurance, okay? So I'm clearly the employer. But also the thing is there's subcontractors. The term subcontractors is a very loose word, right? But subcontractors who work under your control, or you work for somebody under their control, are also counted as employees for insurance purposes. So let me explain what I mean by that. Is if you've got a subcontractor like a groundsman, okay, or you guys are a groundsman, and effectively somebody's saying, you're telling somebody what to do, or you're being told what to do, the guy telling you what to do is giving you orders, you're subordinate to him. You've created a master and a servant relationship. As such, they're going to be responsible for your health and safety. Right? Therefore, it's a criminal offence with a fine of up to £2,500 per day not to have employer's liability insurance. Now, the important thing here is a lot of people say, Bollocks, you don't need that, they're self-employed. That's rubbish. Okay? You don't need employers' liability insurance, they've got their own insurance. It's a bit like this, for example. I will use Charlie at the back there shop as an example. If you've got a tree surgeon, the big test is this. Charlie, if it's your job, are you going to be in charge of it?
Yes.
Okay, if you're in charge of your job, are you going to be in charge of your subcontractors?
Yes.
Okay, if you're in charge of your subcontractors, can you see you're going to be responsible for their health and safety?
Yeah, I can see that, yeah.
Okay, now if you're responsible for their health and safety, then the law states clearly you need to have employers' liability insurance. Right? So the question is, if you're in charge of your job, you're going to be in charge of your subcontractors, as a rule. And this is where the confusion goes, because there are two types of subcontractors. There are what's called labour-only subcontractors, right, and bona fide subcontractors. And this is where the confusion comes. And strange enough, labour-only subcontractors doesn't mean labour-only. Right? Employers' liability insurance doesn't mean you've got to be an employer. Okay? It means you're a lead contractor. It should really be called that. And labour-only subcontractors is the term that's used to denote somebody who supplies mainly labour, and you are is being told to do it, what to do. So let me give you an example of what's called a bona fide subcontractor. A bona fide subcontractor would typically be if you were a tree surgeon and you wanted to get a stump removed. All right, you'd go along, you know, not just a little one that can be ground out, a massive oak tree that was, you know, protruding out, and you thought, well, the best thing to do here is get a big JCB, dig the bugger out. So you get your friend down, Mickey the JCB. Mickey the JCB says, right, I will do that for £500. Okay. Now, first of all, Mickey the JCB has got his own insurance because that's his speciality. But more importantly, because you don't know how to influence the job, you can't say to him, do it this way or do it that way. All right. You can't be responsible for him, and if you can't be responsible for him, all right, the important thing is it's difficult to say that you're in charge of his health and safety. Right? So this guy with the JCB is likely to be a bona fide subcontractor, and you wouldn't be required to cover him with employer's liability insurance. Okay, everybody clearish on that? So it's clear there with the guy with the JCB that you're not telling him what to do. Okay, he's done it on a job rate. It's not a day rate. So a labourer or a climber will be on a day rate. The guy said, I'll do it for 500 quid, that's it. Okay, you're up the other end of the field or on another job, you're not telling them what to do. And therefore, you're unlikely to have to cover him with employer's liability insurance. So let's take another example. We'll take about somebody who's a tree surgeon. And if you're a tree surgeon and you've got a groundsman, now are you going to be telling that groundsman what to do? Of course you are. You will be asserting the fact that you're in control. Right, I will pick you up at 8 o'clock. Don't be late. Don't use your mobile phone. Lunch at 12. Okay, back at 1. Tea at 3. Finish at 5. These are all orders. So you're starting to exert the chain of command. Alright? Now, you're exerting the chain of command, so where's it stop and finish? Well, it's always difficult that, but clearly if you've got a groundsman and you're saying what to do this, do that, you're up a tree, how are you not going to be responsible for him? It's impossible. So if you guys, any of you guys are groundsmen ever for anybody, okay, and they say, somebody says to you, make sure you get your own insurance, that is bollocks. They need to have employer's liability insurance to cover you. That's the law since 1969, right? And also, you can have your own insurance, but it's irrelevant because you're not going to be liable. If something goes wrong, it's not your responsibility, it's the lead contractor's responsibility. So this comes up time and time again with our clients, and when things go wrong, they turn around and say, well, the guy I work for is trying to get me to claim on my insurance. It's pointless. Then it's not going to pay out because you're not responsible. The butt stops at the main man. He who wears the trousers has the insurance. Okay. Now, the other argument, of course, you always hear is, well, the guy who works for me is more qualified for me. It's irrelevant. That's irrelevant. It's not about qualifications, alright? It's about where the butt stops. Now I am actually the boss, But the most qualified person in our office is our finance director, a girl called Karen Vidler. She's got qualifications from here to there, loads more than me. So relevant. I'm the boss, the buck stops with me. And you've always got to remember that. And the other thing we always hear is this: oh, well, neither of us are in charge. We work together. We're kind of a partnership. Well, you either work as a partnership, it's registered with the Inland Revenue, or you don't. And one person will be subordinate to the other. And this is the reason why that happens. Because if you're felling a tree and it all goes wrong, whose fault is it going to be? The person who tied the rope or the person who let go of the rope? If you're digging a hole, is it the person who dug the first foot or the second foot? Okay? It's impossible to establish blame. So therefore, you're either in a partnership, okay, or you're not. The other favourite one is this, where you said, well, you know, guys who work for me, these are self-employed and I'm not on site, always. And the answer is this: the chief executive of Tesco's is in charge of every bloody store and everybody who works for Tesco's. He doesn't have to be in every store. They've got 500 stores or 1,000 stores. Okay? He who's in charge is in charge. Whether you're on site or not, you're in charge. And that's the important thing here. Alright? Now, there are grey areas, because people might say, well, you know, okay, my groundsman brings his own chipper. Alright? Do I need to have employer's liability insurance for him? Well, the answer is that's more difficult. Yes, clearly when he's working for you as just a groundsy and he's up the tree. But if he said to you, okay, how much to chip all that wood, or you said to him, how much to chip all that wood, and he said £500, and he's getting on with it with his own back, and you're on another site, then he may well be a bona fide subcontractor. So there are grey areas, but very, very few. And the other example is this, which is always important. So when you go and work for somebody, and some of you guys might, you know, end up with successful businesses, that the captain of the ship, is always in charge of everything. You know, the captain's in charge of cleaning, the captain's in charge of the engines, the captain is in charge of the food, the kitchens, the cleaning. Alright? Absolutely entertainment. At the end of the day, everything stops with the captain. Alright? Now, when the ship's got docks, maybe people loading things onto the ship are the bona fide subcontractors, but when that ship's at sail, at sea, he's in charge of everybody. Alright, and the buck stops with him. And with businesses, it's like that. So that's public liability and employer's liability, which is the main area of confusion. We had this guy say, well, look, okay, the guy works for me, and so let's say his insurance his public liability was 400 quid. And I said, and on the employer's liability insurance that you've got to have it is £300, so we quoted £700. And then he's read our insurance guide, and there's a few times when you don't need employer's liability insurance. And it's obviously business partnerships, because if you're actually a partnership, you're not employing each other, you're not subordinate, you're actually partners, equal partners to the role. Okay? So therefore you don't need employer's liability insurance. So the guy said, I know, I've read your insurance guide, okay, available free to download. Alright, on our website. I read your insurance guide, and I'm going to make you my partner in my business. So I said, why would you give up half of your business for £300? Why would you possibly do that? That is the most stupid thing I've heard for a long time. You know, you're going to give up, you told me you make 20 grand a year, alright? You're going to give half of that up for 300 quid. And I said, well, I'll give you 300 quid and I can have half of it as well. Why would you possibly do that? We lost that case particularly, but that is how stupid people do. And they will do anything to try and avoid employer's liability insurance. Alright? If you guys go and work for somebody, and they say they haven't got employer's liability insurance, do not work for them. Because they're cowboys, they're breaking the law, okay? And if they're breaking the law on that, what else are they doing wrong? Professional indemnity insurance. So, professional indemnity insurance, is anybody be brave enough to ask what professional indemnity insurance is? Or answer the question.
People need advice, like surveys or something.
Or lectures. Exactly, so professional indemnity is giving advice, surveys, loader inspections, or lectures, because training is advice. Okay, so professional indemnity is a type of insurance that will actually cover you that if you give advice out and the advice is wrong. So what sort of advice could you give somebody that could be wrong. Okay, well, a typical example would be, don't worry, that tree, that willow tree will not cause any problems with the foundations of that house. Okay, 6 months later the house is, you know, all, you've got major problems with subsidence. So that's the sort of thing that you get. Alright, so that is advice. Also, advice is like, if you say that will look beautiful, and it doesn't, that is advice. It's very difficult to sue somebody, take somebody to court and say, I need money because they said that tree will look wonderful and it looks shit. But at the end of the day, that is still advice. So what you've got to do is make a decision is whether you need that professional indemnity insurance, is whether you feel that you could be financially liable for what your opinion. So if you're giving a lot of advice, you need to make serious consideration to trading as a limited company, which doesn't fall within the remit of this lecture, but you've probably all done a little bit on sole trade as limited companies. A limited company can be shut down, the sole trader is you. So in many ways, you can be liable for that advice until you die. So if you're giving lots of advice, you need to take professional opinions whether you should actually be a limited company. And that's a really important factor to consider in the future. Now, another important type of insurance. Oh, any more questions on that at all? Are we okay? Another important type of insurance is, question in the back?
Does it, if it's limited, does it mean you can say it's a limited company's fault and not your fault as such, like it's separated from you?
Okay, all 2 bits of half knowledge there, important, yeah. So yeah, if you own a limited company, then the limited company is not you. It's an entity in itself. The fact that you may own the shares is irrelevant, it's not you. So it's the limited company's responsibility, but not yourself. So you can say, shut it down. Tool insurance is quite obvious. It's your tools, your chainsaws, your ballistic nylon trousers, everything else, chippers. Okay, that's your tool insurance. And you have to be very careful, but most thefts can be prevented. The number one thing to deter thefts is a burglar alarm. Okay, so if you've got equipment, obviously good physical, don't need it, you know, in a sort of, you know, paper garage, but good physical requirements. And burglar alarm is the number one deterrent. Personal accident insurance, guys. So what's the most important tool in your business? You're the most important tool in your business, right? But isn't it weird that people insure their chainsaws, they insure their pets, their TVs, right, their cars, their house contents, all that stuff, but they don't insure their eyes? How weird is that? Was that a question for you?
No, obviously.
Yeah, so the thing here is they don't insure their eyes. So my view is, after your legal obligations, okay, for employer's liability, then potentially the personal accident insurance is the most important thing. Because do you know what? You can always buy a chainsaw, right? You can always buy a chainsaw, you know, but you can't buy a new eye or a new leg. You can't do it. And this is the thing, people spend all their money on insuring all their tools and their pets, but they won't insure themselves, which is just ridiculous. So guys, when you come to go into business, whether you're self-employed or employed, you need to look at personal accident insurance. If you're an employed person, you could argue there's less of a need. If you work for a large employer, like for example a local council, you're likely to get what's called sick pay benefits, which is often 3 months or 6 months full pay. Okay? If you work for a small employer, like me for example, okay, because we've only got like 12 people, and I'm a mingit, you won't get any sick pay, which means if you can't work due to ill health or an accident, you won't actually get anything. And if you're self-employed, you get bugger all. If you work for somebody as well and they've got employer's liability, you could say, well, I don't need personal accident insurance because I'm covered with my employer, because my employer's got employer's liability insurance. Which brings this whole back to employer's liability insurance. Because employer's liability insurance only pays out if the employer is found to be responsible. So the important thing there is you've got to see that everybody needs personal accident insurance. And the other important thing is this, right? Who plays football, goes skiing, goes for a beer, and goes for a barbecue? Does anybody not do any of those things? Okay? Right, so the important thing is, if your employer, if you injure yourself skiing and can't work for 6 months, is your employer going to pay you? No. If you go to a pub in Haddo and have a pub fight and break your jaw and can't act because you've got a brace on and can't work for 4 months, is your employer going to pay you? Probably not. Okay, so these are the things that you get very little money from the state, remember. So this is the other reason why you need personal accident insurance, because it will replace that type of income as well. So that's the key.
Even if you go down the pub?
Yeah, we had one guy and he got broken jaw and he had to have some sort of brace, and he couldn't eat for like 6 months or 3 months without it, so he couldn't work. Yeah, he got into a pub fight. Yeah. The worst, we had a few gruesome claims. Yeah, you should probably, I should go outside pubs in Hadlow and sign people up, shouldn't I, on the way in? But actually, the worst claims we've had, we had somebody 6 months off with an infected testicle, they called it on a barbed wire. Yeah. And he said it was gruesome. And the funniest one was, this guy, well, not that it was funny particularly, but he was walking his dog. He was a tree surgeon, he was walking his dog and he tripped over and he fractured his coccyx, which was the bottom bone there, and he was off for months and months with it. And he said he just didn't know how he did it, because he was up all day climbing, playing around with chainsaws, and he managed to do that. So yeah, so this is the important thing. So if your employer says, it's fine, I'll pay you full wages for a year, yeah, you might not need personal accident insurance. But unless he says that, there's a damn good argument that you will need it. Now, one of the other things is that I should have talked about, there's 2 types of insurance. There's contractual insurance that you have to have for, and legal. The only insurance that you have to have by law is employer's liability insurance, okay, and actually third-party vehicle insurance. The other type of insurance is contractual, where you required it for a contract. That's public liability insurance, all right? So, for example, let's say you go and work for some Kent County Council or whatever, they will say you've got to have £5 million, all right? And people say they should, because they've got to have £5 million worth of public liability to have get the contract. It's a legal requirement. It's not. It's a contractual requirement to work for the council. So always be careful with that. A legal requirement and what they require can be 2 different things. Any questions? Yes.
What's the best insurances to have if you're a sub?
For you? Well, first of all, you want to do, make sure who you're working for has got employer's liability insurance.
Yeah.
Okay? If they turn around and say, no, get your own, tell them to go fuck themselves. If they have got employer's liability insurance, then what you need to have is make sure you've got personal accident insurance. Because you can still have an accident and they're not be responsible, which is the key. Right? And what sports do you do? You don't. Okay, do you have a beer? Okay, so the issue is if you go out and about, you still need to have personal accident insurance because you don't know what can go wrong. Alright, which is the key. So for you, personal accident insurance, when you start doing your private jobs, public liability and employer's liability insurance, for the time being, only personal accident insurance.
Okay.
Do you do it cheaper if you've got tickets as well?
Oh, again, that relates back to what we said earlier. Okay? Because I said to you, Stefan, I said that insurance, you have to warrant that you're suitably qualified. That we don't ask to see your qualifications, but if you're not suitably qualified for the work you do, the insurance ain't going to pay out. Any more questions? Do you want a quote?
How much would the quote be for personal accident?
Well, what I would do on that, the best thing to do on that is actually give us a call. And the reason I'll say that is because your insurance is tailor-made to you. Okay? And you probably don't want to discuss your details with everybody else. Alright? Because we might ask some health questions, you know, sexually transmitted diseases. Alright? And you may not want to do.
If I was just doing like private jobs at the weekends and stuff, so after I've done my tickets,
Yeah.
would you then say get employers so if I get someone to come and help me?
Yeah. The thing is, it's not an option, guys. So this is it. It's not an option. It's the law. Because what you don't want to do, you really don't want to do is do a weekend job, have your mate work for you. And my favourite one is this, right? My mate wouldn't sue me. He's my mate. Poke his eye out and see what happens. Right? Plus also, do you really want to start your career, right, with an HSC prosecution? Right? And then tell me this, which company is A, going to want to insure you if you've been prosecuted by the HSE, and who is going to want to employ you when you've been prosecuted? Because it's a criminal offence, it's not a speeding offence, it's a criminal offence, the same as nicking something. Alright? So your application form for your job will say, have you ever been convicted of a criminal offence? It's a crime. Back to your question, what was the question, Bert?
If I've got employees liability.
Okay, right, so how to, okay, so this is who's the job, okay? So you can't share responsibility, because the customer will know who's in charge, quite effectively. Unless a customer rings, first of all three of you at once, the reality is one of you is going to be in charge. Alright, first of all, and if three of you say none of us are in charge, well, who's going to ensure somebody and nobody's in charge? Not a good risk from an insurance point of view. Now, what you're alluding to is, hey, if one of you's got the certificate, can you all dance around it? Okay, the answer is no. For you, okay, that's the reality of it. The answer is no. Because the issue is that one of you is going to be, who's going to be responsible? Whoever's responsible is wearing the trousers, alright, actually needs to have employer's liability insurance. And that's really important. Okay, now, with business, a little bit, this is all about marketing now, you will get more business by being in charge. Okay, and if you ever say to a customer, who's in charge, and they go, well, we sort of share it, okay, you're not going to get the business. I'm in charge, but stops with me, I will make sure everything goes well. A, you will get more business, and B, you'll be able to charge more. Alright? And secondly, if you're doing that, you're already exerting yourself to actually be in charge of the other guys. So, somebody's got to wear the trousers. Okay? If not, you're doing the worst thing possible. What you're doing is, you're giving insurance companies money, and also saying to them, you don't have to pay out, because we're breaking every condition. So, if it's your job, you're in charge of it. Okay? If, for example, one of you's got public liability and employer's liability insurance, but, sorry, the orange, your name is? Tony. And Tony says, you know, my neighbour wants their trees done, okay, and I said I can do it for you. The answer is we're going to say is, I can do it, but I'll be doing it with my friend through his business. I'll be working for him. I'll get him down to do it. But the best thing to do is give us a call, and we'll make sure you get a great price and the right cover.